Hi, this is Mark Moneypenny. This is my EDL 851, Module 8, Legal Aspects of Teacher Evaluation. The first article I dealt with was the teacher evaluation heads to the courts, and this had to do with 14 different court cases dealing with evaluation process and grievances. And they dealt with the American Federation of Teachers, AFT, and the National Education Association, the NEA, and different affiliates associated with them. And a lot of these dealt with just test scores, pay scales, fairness of the evaluation process, tenure, due process, and flawed data. The next article was a teacher evaluation issues and overview. And this was the teacher evaluation systems, how they were traditionally just conducted by the principals. And a lot of them they basically had rubrics and checklists they went through just to make sure the teachers were doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then starting in the 1990s and through the 2000s, data showed some teachers were helping their other students more, and other teachers were not. Their teachers that were helping the students better were actually getting better test scores and showing much better improvement. And a 2009 study showed that 99% of the teachers in these 12 districts ranked satisfactory, and tenured teachers almost were never fired. And this is just kind of an alarming thing, just seeing how 99% of the teachers were ranked satisfactory. Then they were revamping the teacher evaluation arguments, and they were saying the results would better information and would have strengths and weaknesses of the teachers. But policymakers were focused on just removing the bad teachers. They weren't actually focused on what was an effective teacher. And the federal interventions provided grants of $4.3 billion. And this was a 2009 American Reinvestment and Recovery Act. And this was changing the teacher evaluation systems. There was 3 levels of performance, and it was either a satisfactory, proficient, or ineffective. And factors in students' achievement were also going to be assessed in the evaluation. So it didn't really matter how good of a teacher you were. If you just had students that were not achieving for some reason, that was going to be basically reflected upon you. And by 2013, 28 states were requiring annual evaluations, and 41 states were requiring student achievement data. So of those 41 states, all of the student achievement, what their students were doing was tied into what they were, how the kids were doing, not necessarily, once again, how they were teaching. And the teachers' ratings were differed state by state. So one state could be saying that you were having your evaluation was going to be satisfactory, but if you take the same evaluation to another state, you could be seen as unsatisfactory or ineffective. And certain legislatures were connected on seeing about affecting the compensation of teachers, the promotion of teachers, and the dismissal of teachers. And this was all a part of the evaluation process. And a new teacher evaluation, they were seeing this as being a more complex thing to be able to evaluate on. Observations were going to be part of it. It was going to be a focus on the teacher standards, and there's going to be less random errors occurring, and that's what they were all saying was going to be the positives of this new teacher evaluation. And by 2011, the NEA and the AFT they had new statements on the process of evaluation. They were saying that need to have better feedback. They were concerned on the connecting evaluations with teachers' pay and tenure. And academically, they were against the inclusion of students being on this evaluations and the standardized test scores and the validity of the tests. And there was no equality of the students with special needs. So if you happen to have 12 students in your class that were basically on special needs for as far as tests, and they were not doing so well, that would totally affect you versus another teacher who maybe had AP kids and they were all just skyrocketing through the charts. Basically, one teacher who had the special needs kids could be seen as a teacher who needs more helpers and not doing a better job just because of where their students are, versus the other teacher with all the higher kids. Maybe he's not a good of a teacher, but just because of the students they have, they're seen as a more effective teacher. And there was an anti-testing opt-out due to the standardized testing. Standardized testing was more frequent evaluations, and only 15% into 30% of the teaching subjects were standardized testing, and the Democrats were the strongest supporters of this. In the District of Columbia's the Impact Teacher Evaluation System had a better evaluation system better evaluations from when they had a teacher maybe was unsatisfactory one year, and they were given a bonus if they were going to for the next year as far as their test scores going up, or they're going to be potential dismissal. So their teaching, they were actually more inspired, more motivated to go teach. The next article was teacher evaluation, and this focused on the replacing the underperforming teachers, and this was not helping teachers become more effective. The NEA identified there was 25 new regulations, and these regulations were focused on student learning and achievement. And some states worked with the NEA for this shared vision. The purpose of the evaluation was to provide a resource for the bargaining or advocating for the collective bargaining agreement, and does this not provide the best evaluation systems. The NEA belief is you need to have an enhanced teaching, not to categorize teachers all into one certain area. And they did want to reward the best teachers, and they wanted to fire the worst teachers. They didn't want to keep the bad teachers around. They wanted to have a fair and honest evaluation process. Safe and open collaboration is necessary for a good evaluation. You need to have a transparent evaluation process. Everyone needs to know what's going on. You need to develop professional communities. You need to know what's going on, what the best evaluation process is, and you need to have a non-threatening environment, so you can't have teachers looking over their shoulders trying to figure out if this is going to be a good evaluation or bad evaluation, just judging by the kids they have in their class. And they want to, you measure the best performances when you based on multiple ratings of clear standards, and you're giving feedback that's the best for the teacher. You can't just have standards where people don't know what's going on, and you have to communicate with the teachers. They have to be able to know what's going to happen, and they need to know what's expected of them. And the evaluation systems must be integrated. The curriculum standards must be integrated into the evaluation system, the professional development, targeted support, and the human capital decisions. You just can't have a evaluation process with no one knows what's going on. Everything has to be interrelated. The evaluation measures essential were widely accepted standards and multiple methods. So the standards need to be, they can't just be one standard. It's just going to be accepted. You need to be able to do your research over a lot of accepted standards and use multiple methods of evaluation. You can't just use one method, clear-cut method, because that's just not fair to the teachers. And the teacher's input is input determining the performance should be included. They would help define the practices. They would define what the students are learning objectives, and the teachers have the most valuable insight into their classroom. They know what's going on. They know the strengths and the weaknesses of their students. They would be able to communicate that with the evaluator. And the assessments of the evaluations deployed with the local teachers association. Your local teachers association needs to know what's going on. They need to be able to help set the standards and what's going to be happening. And A lot of it goes into what's going on right now with a lot of schools is your collective bargaining agreement, and your ideals are balanced for the local context. You can't have one thing that's being taught in California and the same standards be here in Kansas. And there's no one size fits all category. Everything has to be individualized, and you can't just throw everyone into one lump sum general category. The comprehensive definition of an effective teacher is positive academics, attitudes, and social outcomes, engaged learning and opportunities, adaptive instruction. That's where you're using multiple resources, multiple different strategies for different students you have in your class, and the development of classrooms and schools, and the collaboration with teachers, parents, and the educational professionals. You can't just have a couple people talking with each other. You have to have basically all the stakeholders involved. The model core teaching standards are based on research, and all this research, everything needs to be involved in this evaluation process, and the learning development, the differences, learning environments, the content, the application of the content, the assessment, the planning for instruction, the instructional strategies, and the professional learning, and the ethical practices, and the leadership and collaboration. All these things have to be grouped together to be able to have a successful evaluation process. You can't just focus in on one thing. You have to be able to take everything as a whole. And the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards, they have core propositions and standards, and they're all committed to the students and their learning. They teach how to teach those subjects to students. They're managing and monitoring student learning, and their practices are learning from experience, and members are of a learning community. The big thing there is learning. This is a learning responsibility for everybody. The next article was the teacher evaluation measures and systems. Successful evaluation system features, which I found very interesting, was a creative link to integrated systems. It's aligning evaluation practices with other systems. You just can't have one evaluation practice, one size fits all, like they were saying before. It uses validated evaluation measures. It means there's credible, meaningful, and useful to enhance teaching. It's not just useful to teaching towards a test. It's enhancing your teaching, and you're establishing credibility with the administrators, teachers, teachers unions, and stakeholders. And you need to gain the trust from the teachers so they're going to buy into the process. You can't just force this on them and expect them just to love it if they don't really know what's going on. And the research evaluation instruments, they're based on rubrics. They're specific and detailed. There's set specific procedures. The raters are consistent, so you don't have one rater doing one thing one day and then another thing. They're going to be studying it. They're going to be reliable. The raters are going to be unbiased, so they're not just going to have a personal grudge and going off on somebody. And they have an established system, and it's practical and feasible. And the big thing there at the bottom is it has to be properly used. You could have the best system in the world, but if you're not going to properly use it, and you're just going to skew it to what you want the results to be, the system is just not going to work. The evaluation process used in USC 475, we have the Kansas Educator Evaluation Protocol. It was just it's Keep 2. Now we're in the version of Keep 2. And for the first and second year teachers, you get evaluated 2 times per year prior to the sixth month or day of the semester, the 60th day of each semester. Years 3 and 4, it's once per year, and it has to be done by February 15th. And if you're the 5 years or more, it's one time every 3 years. And once again, it's by February 15th. And this is going through all the steps of the KEEP process. Step 1 was the assessment protocol. This is where a teacher does the self-evaluation of themselves. They go through there's 4 constructs, and there's 2 to 4 components per construct, and each teacher has to rate themselves and where they see themselves in each area. And in one of those constructs, you're choosing a goal for yourself. And next step is the beginning of the cycle conference, and this is completed by the evaluator, and both parties sign a form. So basically, you go through all the steps and what's going to happen, and you're basically clicking buttons and boxes. Step 3 is the mid-cycle conference. And once again, this is completed by the evaluator, and the evaluator places there's a comment box for anything that's said and anything that's going on, so everyone's in the loop. And once again, you have to basically check a box, and both of you have to check a box to make sure everything goes through. And step 4 is the end of cycle conference, and this is when your evaluations are completed, and this is completed by the evaluator, and most times it's just the principal or the assistant principal, and your goals are completed. If you completed your goals, evaluator is going to select yes or no. If it's a no, the evaluator will have to complete a text box for a summary, and the evaluee completes the comments in a text box, so any feelings that they have, they're able to put down, and so they can have their what they were feeling documented as well. And both signatures have to be checked in the boxes and a date completion for it actually be submitted. The next step is the student growth measures, or the summary rating. This is completed by the evaluator, and they're choosing 2 to 3 students for the gross measurements recorded. And the evaluator is notes that the gross measures have been met. So basically, they see where they were in the beginning of the year and where they are at the end of the year. And a recommendation is visible for the evaluator. He or she may or may not accept it. The current rating is served, and which the evaluator has recommended. And the next step is the instructional practice protocol of the rating, and this is completed by the evaluator. The evaluator checks one of the 4 keep ratings and say they're ineffective, developing, effective, or highly effective. And the evaluator may or may not accept the teacher rating. And the final step 7, it's to summarize of the rating sheet, and this combines the student growth measures and with the instructional practice protocol summary and the overall educator evaluation summary rating. And comments are put in by both parties into the box. So the teacher has their comments, the principal is going to have their comments as well, and both have to check the box in this evaluation process. It's kind of a mind-blowing process. You had 2 people sitting there with their computers, and they were checking boxes back and forth to make sure everything's checked. And if there's something that's not checked, you find out at the end because nothing's submitted. And if you have a problem with you don't agree with the evaluation process, if you got an unsatisfactory in our school district, and if you thought it was unfair, inaccurate, incomplete, the first step is you need to attempt to resolve the problem with your administrator. And if you cannot resolve the issue, then you'll be able to send an appeal in. You have to contact the teacher has the rights to the appeal to the executive director of human resources services. And that's where the official process would start. And the teacher is protected with all their rights. Nothing's going to be held against them. Looking on a case in Florida, the Cook versus Bennett and Robinson versus Stewart on April 16, 2013, the allegations were teachers and subjects were statewide standardized tests are being judged unfairly. And the judge for the students and subjects, they judge for the students and the subjects they do not teach. So the teachers were being evaluated on all these different, like, for example, like I teach PE, but I'm also affiliated with the fifth grade teachers and how they do with their testing. And it's not quite fair as far as if those kids didn't do well, but my rating is also going on a subject I don't teach. And this is based on a school-wide growth formula. And these teachers in Florida did not agree with their rating being associated with that. and the verdict was the federal court judge for the state, and it was affirmed by the U.S. Court of Appeals. They ruled for the state, and right now the status is complete. My reflection: how would I ensure I am following the legal issues associated with the evaluation process? As a principal, first I would know what the collective bargaining agreement is saying towards the evaluation process. I would know everything that's in there. I would be memorizing the evaluation process. I would always have in the back of my head little check boxes, things going around. And the biggest thing is you have to communicate with the teachers. You can't just lead the teachers blindly, and you have to, if you have a question, you have to let the teachers know it. This is my question, and if you have a question of me, they need to be able to feel comfortable asking a question. And I also need to communicate with the district office, see what standards are, if any standards have changed, what are the expectations. If I have a question about procedures and everything, I need to keep everyone in the loop, and I need to communicate with the teachers union. If I have a pressing issue that I'm kind of confused on, I just contact the teachers union to see what the proper steps are to make sure that I want to make sure I'm not stepping on anyone's toes. I'm not overstepping my bounds. I want to make sure that I'm following the legal process. I want to give the teachers all the benefits they can have, because it's not an easy job having all the students in your class in the evaluation process. It's a very stressful position to be in. And know the steps of due process. So if something happens and the teacher's not happy with it and they're trying to figure it out, I know exactly what steps they have to go through to be able to see everything through, and know the appeals process. So if the teacher does have an appeal and they're not agreeing with the evaluation, me as a principal, I have to be able to have all the documentation and know what the process is and be able to be clear and everything on what's going on. Thank you very much, and hopefully I got everything inside this video.